Welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I am your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is an attorney, Raymond Sheffield. He has his own law practice here in San Jose called the Sheffield Law Office. He specializes in trusts and estates, and the company is in San Jose, California. Been a lawyer for, 11 years? And received a JD degree from Santa Clara University and an LLM degree, which is Master's of Letters of Law from University of Miami in estate planning. And Ray tells me that he loves the role of counseling clients for their estate planning. And in addition to his law practice, he's an adjunct professor at the Golden Gate University LLM tax program. He also does, I know, a lot of continuing education classes, helping CPAs and other professionals get up to speed in estate planning, helping their clients, life insurance agents, that sort of thing. And Ray and his wife live with their two adopted daughters, who are aged 3.5 and 5, from Russia, in Almaden Valley, which is in San Jose, California. Today, we're going to be talking about estate planning for retirement accounts. Before we get started, I just want to caution you, this is actually a very big area. We could talk about this for days, maybe, if we really got into a lot of the details. So it's just intended as an introduction and hopefully a continuing conversation with your own lawyer. And we're trying to encourage people to do estate planning in general. So Ray, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike.
It's a pleasure having you on the show again. So, estate planning for retirement accounts. Why is this important? Don't I just name a beneficiary on a form?
Well, certainly everyone names a beneficiary on some form, right?
Well, they better.
They better.
Some people don't.
The problem is if you haven't coordinated this with your estate plan, you may lose some of the benefits of the estate plan, or especially if you have minor children. If something happens to you early, your child will get access to your plan, or the retirement plan of money at age 18. Well, no one drafts an estate plan to give an 18-year-old access to money, right? Otherwise, they're going to be the most popular kid in school, buying beer for everybody, and the money doesn't last. So it's real important to make sure you coordinate this plan, your retirement plan, with the other estate planning that you've done to make sure they're in sync together.
Okay, good. Well, what happens to my IRA or my 401k if something happens to me?
So, well, when you die, right, you've named a beneficiary. And of course, the question is, which beneficiary, should you name? And how should they be named, right? But they'll receive the money and under the terms that you've decided. And of course, if you haven't decided, if you've just written some name down there, then usually the tax law and the plan provider provide a default of how that money will go to the beneficiary.
Okay. Well, can I name anybody as my beneficiary?
You really can. I mean, you're not required to name anyone in particular as your beneficiary. Though there may, depending on what state you're in, there may be rules that require you to name your spouse. And certainly for a 401k plan, you're required that your spouse be the beneficiary unless he or she is signed off on some paper saying that they don't want to be the beneficiary.
Right, so that's basically really for any employer-provided.
For any employer-provided plan, yes. The spouse is automatically a beneficiary unless they say, I don't need to, and they need to do that in writing.
Yes, okay. Well, how are things different for your first spouse as compared to a second spouse?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. If you're married to your first spouse, right, and you have children in common, right, most of the time you're going to leave the money to the surviving spouse and then they'll leave it to the kids. If you're married to someone who's not the mother of your children or the father of your children, you have a second spouse type of relationship, then that can be a little more problematic, right? If you give the spouse the money, and then they marry somebody else, is their money going to come back to your kids, right? If you have kids who are the same age as your spouse, right, waiting for your spouse to die before your kids would eventually get the money may be a very long wait, right? And for some of my clients, their new spouses are younger than their children, in which case the kids may be dead before the new spouse ever gets
Right.
Dies themselves.
Right.
And trying to do that planning can become complicated. It's not just a simple, well, I'm going to put this person down. You need to coordinate how the rest of your planning works. How are you going to leave money here or there? And there are mechanisms that we can use to ensure that the surviving spouse, while they may have access to the money for the rest of their life, has limited access to what happens to it after they die, so that it can still be preserved for your family or your kids' benefit.
So I think one thing I can say pretty safely is whatever you do, somebody is going to be unhappy. Okay. So if you set up one of these arrangements, again, where the spouse doesn't have total control, that spouse is going to be unhappy. On the other hand, if they have the total control, then the children are going to be unhappy. So it's a very tough area.
It's a very tough area to plan in, because most of the time there's limited resources. And a client I was talking to this morning, right, has a second spouse. They've been married for 25 years, but it's not the mother of his children. Mm-hmm. And so he wants to make sure he takes care of her, but at the same time he wants to take care of his kids. And trying to make the resources stretch so that they don't have to wait for her to die before they get something, and yet make sure there's adequate capital set aside to take care of her, is a complicated thing, and should be done with professional advice.
Right. Now also, I mean, I guess we should just throw this out, that, and by the way, there's a whole show that we did related to tax planning for second marriages. We did a great interview with Mike Demery on this.
Oh, yes.
And so you can find it in past episodes at financialinsiderweekly.com. But this is an important area, folks, and we'll probably be revisiting it again. But anyway, I mean, life insurance can be something that can be very helpful in trying to equalize and balance this thing out, and especially when you don't have a lot of other resources, but to create an estate, to provide for all these people. So
absolutely, where you set aside life insurance either to take care of the spouse or to take care of the kids, so that you know that they're not going to be pitted against one another, mm-hmm. and you take care of your obligations, and life insurance creates that estate. In fact, when dealing with the retirement plans, from a tax standpoint, there are times when we will take that retirement plan and have the premiums be used, the distributions from the retirement plan be used to pay for the premiums on the life insurance, because I can move the life insurance out of the estate for tax purposes, and that may be a little beyond where we are today. Yeah. But that retirement plan is ordinary income coming out, so there's a lot of tax and estate tax on that if you die. The life insurance we can move out of the estate and not have to pay estate tax. It's income tax-free death benefit, and oftentimes it's a better way to accomplish the goals for taking care of that second spouse than just say, here's a retirement plan asset.
Right. Okay. So now we'll talk for a moment about, I guess, just the rollover. So first of all, a spouse can basically, if you have it to them outright, they can treat it as their own account.
They can, mm-hmm. But there's some interesting rules with rollovers, and one of the things that you should be aware of, not every surviving spouse should do a rollover mm-hmm. of the participant's IRA.
Right.
When I talk around the country to financial planners, and in fact I was just in Denver last October to the Financial Planning Association at mm-hmm. their annual conference, mm-hmm. talking on this issue, if the surviving spouse is older than the deceased spouse, mm-hmm. or if the surviving spouse is under 59 and a half,
right.
Doing a rollover may have a bad tax consequence to them.
Right.
We have a client in our office right now who, the first thing she did when her husband died was called the mutual fund company who told her to do a rollover.
Right.
Well, by the time she came into our office, she'd already done the rollover.
Right.
The problem is she's 43 years old. So when she did the rollover, and now she can't get access to the money until she turns 59 and a half.
Yeah, now there is a way, of course, you can do a series of substantially equal payments, but it's a lot less than she could take out otherwise. And usually there's a desperate need to get a hold of cash when somebody passes away, and that might be the only source that they have.
Well, that's it. He didn't have hardly any life insurance, you know, and she had quit her job to take care of him while he was sick. And so all of a sudden her cash was locked up in something that really didn't need to be done. And when you do under 72T, those payments have to be equal over 5 years.
Yes.
Well, she didn't need 5 years worth of equal payments. What she needed was a cash infusion for the time being until she could get a job and start earning her own income.
Right. Okay, well, how about charities? Charities make good beneficiaries for retirement plans?
You know, charities actually make some of the best beneficiaries of a retirement plan. And people don't always think about that. In fact, a lot of attorneys don't really deal with that with their clients. But, you know, when the money comes out of the retirement plan, it's ordinary income to you.
Right.
When you die and let's say you leave it to your children, it's ordinary income to them when they take that money out.
Right.
If it goes to a charity, the charities don't pay income tax. So they're getting 100 cents on the dollar. Your kids, on the other hand, may be getting 60 to 75 cents on the dollar. So, you know, ideally, the first place we want to make charitable gifts in an estate plan is from those retirement plan assets. It's the most efficient. Unfortunately, oftentimes if you go to an attorney and say, well, I want to give $100,000 to the American Cancer Society, the attorney writes in the trust, give $100,000 to the American Cancer Society. And so trust assets are being used to go to the American Cancer Society and not the retirement plan assets. So it's not the most efficient way to handle things.
So this means that a part of the estate planning process is sort of evaluating the assets that you're working with, and then looking at the goals, you know, and the desires of the person who's doing the estate planning as far as what they would like to do in the way of charitable bequests, if that's one of their goals, and then making the most efficient selection, hopefully. And you don't have to make the charity the beneficiary for the whole thing. You could, you know, they could have a share or something like that.
And